Morning, everyone, and Happy New Year 2021 from us at Vickery Holman. My name's Ollie Steer-Fowler. I'm the head of leisure property here at Vickery Holman Property Consultants. I'm based in Exeter, and I work in the valuation and agency teams working with properties and owners across the leisure spectrum. I specialise mainly in holiday parks and self-catering accommodation within our team. This is the third time that we've done one of these webinars. And we hope that it proves informative and insightful for everybody this morning. I will just say that we've had a little bit of technical difficulties this morning with one of our presenters, so we're trying to sort that out in the background, and it may just change the running order slightly. For those of you who are joining us live, I hope you're having a good morning. Please feel free at any time during the presentation to ask us questions and to any of the contributors throughout the webinar today using the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. Hopefully you can see that. I'll be moderating the chat throughout, and I'll pick out any questions to get an answer as we go along. If you know anyone who might find this content useful, then please do let them know after the webinar. There will be a YouTube recording shortly after this. After we finish, so you can take a look at that, and all the info will be on there. So thanks to the people who are joining us live today. Today's subject title is cleverly coined by Leslie, as always, our marketing guru. It's entitled Checking In for 2021. We'll be looking at what lies ahead for the leisure and tourism industry in the Southwest, with a particular focus on hospitality and accommodation sectors. So today's contributors, we've got a star lineup of contributors for today. I'm joined by my colleague and Vickery Holman stalwart, Mike Easton. Mike joined the firm back at the end of 2020 and has a long established knowledge of the pub and hotel sector in the Southwest. Secondly, we're delighted to be joined by Toby Pool of Scown Solicitors. Toby's a partner at the firm and also heads up their leisure and tourism division as the service lead. So welcome to Toby. And lastly, but by no means least, we welcome industry stalwart Robin Barker. Looking at the list of attendees, Robin will be familiar face to many throughout the various Southwest Tourism Awards schemes that Robin runs with his team, of which he's the director. Welcome, Robin. Again, please feel free at any time to ask some questions of our contributors as we go through. So in terms of a format this morning, we've got around an hour today. We won't keep you longer than that if we can help it. As I say, we've been having some technical difficulties with Toby's microphone, so we might run a little bit shorter today, depending on whether we can get that sorted out. We've got a lot of things to discuss that we're moving quite quickly. So much has changed in the sector since we did our last webinar, mid-end of December. I'll kick things off with a brief contextual update on where we are now in our third national lockdown at the time this is going out. Mike Easton and I will then discuss the market and what effect the current circumstances have had on the property market surrounding the leisure industry, and importantly, operator sentiment as well on the ground from owners who we've been speaking to recently. Toby will then deliver his talk, but we're going to change the running order slightly, where Robin will now present his presentation to us to see if we can get Toby's microphone working. So he'll deliver his. Robin will round things off by providing several reasons for optimism, with an in-depth look at the latest consumer research into what leisure customers are looking for in 2021, which will be hopefully useful for our operators amongst the audience today. We'll finish the webinar by fielding any questions that you've got. So there'll be a Q&A at the end. Feel free to drop these questions in at any time. So since the last time we did a At Leisure webinar, one constant of the last few years has finally been put to bed, and the UK has officially left the European Union. However, unfortunately, another constant in our lives in recent times remains in the form of the coronavirus pandemic, which it has and currently is affecting us all in some way, and has had a significant impact on the leisure property market, which will be discussed at length in this webinar. When we started doing these webinars at the start of November, the region had just come off a strong trading summer, boosted by staycation sentiment across the country and an anxiousness to travel by some abroad in some cases. The Southwest was heavily publicised as the go-to location, as has been the case for quite a while now, which is fantastic. And that was in the press throughout the summer and into the autumn, and indeed was extremely busy. The whole area was extremely busy during July, August, and into September. Cases of COVID by September had fallen to comparatively low levels, and the business owners we were speaking to were keen to plan ahead for what looked like it was going to be an uninterrupted 2021. It's famous last words. Unfortunately, cases of coronavirus have started to rise in the late autumn and into winter, moving into a tiered system in the run-up to Christmas. So the Southwest counties in general, when we were in that tier system, were actually at the lower end of the tier spectrum, Cornwall being in tier 1 for the majority of December, and actually having relative freedom compared to the counties and districts which were in the tier 3 and later tier 4. The cases, unfortunately, the spike in cases towards the end of the Christmas New Year period meant that Boris Johnson was forced to announce this current national lockdown at the start of January. This lockdown is as wide-ranging, really, as the first one we had last March, subject to an ongoing review, although I sent from the latest cabinet figures quotes in the news, catching up on the news every morning and evening, that nothing will be changing on the first review date, which is due tomorrow. When we do come out of lockdown, it looks as though there's going to be a return to the tiered system by all accounts. The difference this time around is that we've got a vaccination program in place, which we didn't have when we came out of lockdown last summer. So there is light at the end of the tunnel. A lot of people were hoping. That's being rolled out across the country at breakneck speed. Hopefully, we'll see the benefits of this to come in the spring, when the hope that some sort of normal trading will resume. So unfortunately, similar to last March, we've again seen the closure of the majority of leisure businesses across the Southwest, across the country, and venues, with some pubs able to operate a limited takeaway menu to a degree. As we saw earlier, the law suggests that the lockdown measures could be in place until the end of March, but we'll see what happens between now and then, really. Comments from figures, Dominic Raab, Matt Hancock have suggested that the key date of February half term will be not this year, which is a real shame, and is a big trading period, especially for the accommodation sector in particular, self-catering accommodation and hoteliers who take advantage of that. Hopefully we'll see a return for Easter trading, with Easter Sunday luckily actually being quite late this year. Easter Sunday, I think, is the 4th of April this year. So a lot of accommodation businesses we've been speaking to are targeting an early April return, reopening date. Fingers crossed. Obviously, it's a huge moving picture at the moment. Things are very, very fluid, so we'll see where we get to with that. But fingers crossed. As before, there are a number of government-led financial support schemes in place for businesses, most of which have been in place since the first national lockdown. With some additions for the new lockdown. Amongst them, we've got the reduced 5% VAT and deferred payments schemes for leisure offerings. Business rates holidays across the sector. Business rates are one of the biggest overheads for businesses. Business rates are actually something that we provide a consultancy service for here at Vickery Holman. So we're talking with a lot of operators all the time for surrounding their business rates. We've got a dedicated team, and it's been a welcome relief really to all when trying to manage costs at a time when revenue has been pretty unpredictable, to say the least. The well-documented furlough scheme and the self-employment income support scheme, which I know Toby is going to mention later on, hopefully. The CBILS loan scheme for small, medium and large companies, coronavirus future fund, bounce back loans. Several operators that we're in touch with have taken advantage of these over the course of the last 10 months or so. And there's various cash grants available for eligible businesses that have been forced to close, such as the Christmas period grants for wet-led pubs, and the new one that's come out within the last week or so, which is the new £9,000 grant for small businesses affected by the latest lockdown for qualifying businesses, leisure businesses that would be able to qualify that with certain circumstances. The big question, of course, at the end of this will be when will things end? When will we get back to a relative normal? If I had a crystal ball, I'd love to tell you all the exact date. It's very much a wait and see scenario at the moment. The next couple of months and the rollout of the vaccine are going to be incredibly important in getting leisure businesses back up and running, both safely. And I know that Robin is going to have a lot to say on the safety element of people's marketing moving into 2021, to overcome a lot of people's fears and anxieties that will obviously be in place. And let's hope for a successful year and that we can reopen with a decent chunk of the year's trading still to be able to occur. Right, I'd like to bring in Mike alongside me on the camera if I can. This is where we see if our tech holds up. Here's Mike. Hi, Mike. How are you doing?
So thanks, Ollie. Do you want me to take it from there?
Yeah, so Mike, you're our resident pub, restaurant, hotels man. Could you just provide us really with a brief update on the market at the moment as you're seeing things?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, funnily enough, when we hosted this back at the start of December, we were talking about the quiet optimism, really, that was being seen mostly in the self-catering and the hotel sector. They tend to lead the way because they've got, if you like, a sort of a broader lead-in on bookings, but better understanding. I think what we've got to remember is that, the hotel and hospitality sector is huge, and it covers lots and lots of different micro markets. So whereas we've got some quiet confidence in self-catering, I think at the minute that's being put to the test, of course, because it's being pushed back and back.
Yeah.
You know that we're going to lose half term now. I think Easter, as you mentioned, is literally right on the cusp of hopefully coming out of lockdown 3.
I think that's going to be a big date for everybody in their minds is Easter, is can we get some sort of normality in place for Easter?
Yeah,
really?
Definitely. I think, to my mind, it's a matter of what comes after the self-catering, after the hotels. It's the pubs, the restaurants, the social clubs, the nightclubs. Those guys have really seen some very difficult times. Cash flow turned off, and although there's support in place, at the end of the day, these guys are trying to do their best without any revenue. Even in lockdown 2 at the end of last year, the pub sector was actually just not seeing the customer. The customer could go to them, but they were choosing not to. They knew it was going to be a difficult period anyway. And yet, despite all that, what you actually see is operators who are always looking to the future, making their preparations. They know it'll come. I think as a country, we know things can only get better. It's probably the British way to a certain extent, and it can't come soon enough. I think one of the things I wanted to touch on this morning, though, was actually that we need more government involvement beyond the end of lockdown 3, and hopefully that will be the end of it. Obviously, they are rolling out a vaccine, but we actually need government support within our sector far into the end of this year. Next year, we've seen obviously the VAT break. That really should be set into statute now. That was something that was called for by the industry prior to what's gone on over the last year, and really that should, I think, be set in stone. There also needs to be support for operators getting back on their feet. We saw that with the Eat Out to Dine Out. I think what you've got to remember in the sector is that there's lots of pubs, social clubs, sports clubs that actually can't provide a dining facility. Once we can all be social again, actually we need some support to get people out to support that.
Yeah, I think one of the main criticisms of Eat Out to Help Out as a scheme was the fact that the wet-led sector of hospitality was pretty much left behind with that, and there was no equivalent that was sort of in place to be able to actually drive demand for that, although places were extremely busy, so there was always that knock-on effect. And actually people have been suggesting what impact actually it had overall, Eat Out to Help Out, whether it got places almost too busy at one point. There was a huge spike in demand.
It was an odd scenario, because ultimately what you have, I suppose, when the music stops, it's where you're sat, and practically in venues, you had very, very good but very, very small venues that couldn't accommodate, you know, the list of customers that wanted to come and see them. They just physically couldn't do it. They had to half their covers, and unless you had some outside space and some good weather or some covered outside space, you know, it was very unfair. It's a very unfair situation that everyone's been in the last year. There are those that have actually done quite well, really, just by having some facilities that provided socialising at a distance. The sooner we get out of it, the better, really.
Yeah. Are you seeing much activity from a, you know, in the hotel pub market at the moment? Are you seeing much activity? Is a deal still being done?
When we came out of lockdown 1, it was very similar to the residential market, and I think this is very much a southwest thing. Actually, the southwest is just so popular, and where we saw house prices boom, and we saw latent demand, we did see that in the hotel and the pub sector. But the reality is actually there's not been a lot of stock. You know, it's a sector that's gone through a huge amount of change in the last 20 years. It's adapted to those changes, and actually probably coming into 2020 was as strong as it's been. And what we did basically see after lockdown 1 was people coming in, they've made some life choices. There still isn't bank support, which is quite worrying, and I think that means that we won't necessarily get a peak in prices. But we still do have lots of people that actually want to come and buy a pub, a hotel, a business in the southwest. You know, it's a popular place to be. We had pent-up demand last year, and then that sadly was tempered a little bit by, you know, sort of a limp end to the year, really, and a quiet start to this year. If we had more stock, and I think sadly that will come actually as this year goes on, I think there will be more stock available. I think there's plenty of people out there that want to buy.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. And in terms of operator sentiment on the ground, how are people finding it? Right, you know, we're in another lockdown. We don't as yet really know when the stop point is. You know, I almost use the term backstop, which is, I think, been outlawed in the UK now, hasn't it? Taken out of the Commons English Dictionary. What are people think? Who you're speaking to? What are they saying on the ground?
It really does depend on the operator, what type of site they have, what type of business they run. One thing I did want to mention this morning actually is the support by some of the pub groups. I think pub groups are often vilified actually in the pub sector. And I've seen some significant reductions in rent that's gone throughout the lockdowns and beyond, and set into the future, just to try and keep some form of support to these tenants that are on the ground that have, you know, had their cash flow dry up. But I think
Ollie, can you hear me? Sorry.
For the guys that I've been speaking to in the hotel sector, definitely they just want to get on with things. I feel confident for the year ahead. We're talking about it being pushed back a little bit. I think for the pub and the restaurant guys, it's harder for them because they can't see the physical number on the ground. They don't get the bookings that far in advance, but they know that it'll come. But they've had a tough time of it. Most of them have made the improvements they were going to make. You know, they thought they'd be operating sooner than now, really.
Okay, and I'm more than happy, and hopefully you can hear me okay. And good to be part of this, and lots of very relevant comments already raised by Mike and Ollie there, I think. What I'd like to do is, and I'm not going to claim this is my own research, is run through some of the latest research on 2021 customer expectations, what the customers are out there are wanting. And I'm going to share with you some of the latest Visit Britain research that has been done every week or fortnight since the first lockdown. The next batch is due next week, so we're going to have to rely on slightly old research, but it is still only just pre-Christmas, and it's got some really relevant and I think helpful info in it. I'm just working out how to move the slides on. First up, as part of this survey carried out just pre-Christmas, when of course this was before the latest lockdown. It was also before quite a lot of the good news about vaccinations. And one of the questions in the survey is, when will things return, if ever, to normal? And there's probably a fairly unexpected graph here, and it's certainly not showing anytime soon. And that really it's by May, June before we're getting up to some serious numbers. And some, 93% over on the right by 2022 onwards. And for those who are working with the international market, most are saying it's going to be next year or even beyond before we get anything like normality there. Now, from a tourism perspective, and from our perspective, the confidence amongst UK residents in taking a UK trip is growing quite nicely, but again, it is taking until May and June before it is getting up to more than 30%. So if things haven't changed, that's worrying. I think we've seen quite a lot of media coverage in the last few days that the older population believes that they will be traveling and booking sooner than that. But in parallel, we're getting politicians saying we are not encouraging people to book or travel anytime soon, because actually there is still some questions over people's safety after just one vaccination and so on. So I think all these graphs are going to change every week or so as we go forward. But I'm afraid it's not anytime soon. And by the way, there are some positive slides I've got a bit later too. And the reasons people are quoting for not taking a spring holiday, number one, the obvious one, 57% government restrictions. But also 51%, I have genuine concerns about catching COVID, and that's especially amongst older populations and those whose family members might include someone who is maybe a little bit fragile and so on. Then some really interesting ones there, also with very significant numbers. 46% responsibility. It's not actually responsible to be traveling around a bit this time soon. And then very much linking in with what Mike was saying, those last two ones, fewer things to do, fewer places to go and eat and drink. Tourism is a really diverse sector, and people don't come and stay somewhere in order to stay somewhere. They stay to go out to do things, to eat and drink and so on. So we need the totality of tourism to be back before we wipe out those reasons for people not to be taking holidays. Some good news, again, just pre-Christmas, only 18% of people planning, who normally would take a holiday, had already planned their 2021 holiday. And only 18% had already booked. And the good news from that is there is huge potential. There is real demand out there. People want and are desperate to get out and have a good time. And as soon as they have the right assurances, I believe that they're going to be booking. And of course, as long as we're all marketing effectively. Some more really good news. If you ask them where they want to go, absolutely tops, above Scotland, above Wales, above all other English regions, Southwest. This is where they really want to come. And what do they want to go to? What kind of place? Well, they want to go to countryside or village or coast, rural coastline. Less likely is to go to the big cities, smaller cities okay, and so on. So again, we've got absolutely the right kind of product to attract these visitors back. But, and this one I'm going to linger on a little bit, they do have some essential conditions. The different color schemes on this graph, the green ones are largely related to safety features, so staff wearing masks, guests wearing masks, daily health checks. They want businesses to be guaranteeing that they're safe. The dark blue ones, they want transferable bookings, free cancellation, some special offers and so on. The pale blue ones, plentiful hand sanitizers, cleaning regimes, super fast check-ins, packaged foods not open, buffets, and so on. And the red ones, enforced in social distancing, reduced capacity, bigger, wide open spaces, and so on. This is what consumers are saying they absolutely need to have before they book. And one of the things that we have done over the last couple of months, going through all of this last year's awards entrance, is we've been looking at hundreds of websites and getting in touch with tourism businesses to ask what's behind the websites. And our conclusion is that virtually every hospitality business is doing really good things and is doing most of these things in terms of safety, more flexible cancellation, and so on. But, and this is a huge but, a huge proportion, around about 50%, aren't telling anyone about it on their websites. A lot of businesses have websites that only seem to get updated once a year, and they sometimes post what they're doing on a blog or on social media. But of course, those are things that disappear into history and they're not there front of face on websites. So if I have a number one message to tourism businesses, it's to tell the customers what you're doing, because they need huge assurances that you are meeting these conditions before they ever actually book, click the book button. So really important message too. And of course, that's also important for your local community. We've already seen some communities saying, well, we don't want the visitors back anytime soon. Well, tourism businesses need to be showing that you are operating safely and not endangering your local community as well. So a really important slide there. So my message, a few extra points on here, really important to carry on communicating. We have seen so many tourism businesses where the first tranche of people to be furloughed, or in worst cases made redundant, were the marketing teams and the communicators. Well, marketing is something you have to invest in, and businesses have to carry on communicating through this crisis. So you need your marketers. We need the websites updated with relevant messages, relevant imagery. We need these staff trained to make sure that they're giving the assurances. Social media active, again, showing that you're not in deep depression, but actually planning to offer the best experience you've ever done. Blogs, showing stories. Remembering that the audience for the year ahead is likely to be a different audience, and you may need to be using some different language to communicate with it. We saw last year that a lot of people visiting the Southwest were first-time visitors. Some of them didn't actually want to be here. They wanted to be in Benidorm or wherever. And some of them were quite grumpy as a result. Well, you need to take account of all of that in what you're doing. Flexibility, certainly in terms of cancellation policies, amendments, and so on. People are generally happy to be booking, as long as they know that if something nasty comes along and bites them, they can change it. Well, that is needing some really good flexible booking options too. Use of video, important. Some of the best examples I've seen, actually some of the attractions have put together fabulous videos showing what would happen when you come and visit us. And it's not negative, because it's actually showing enhanced cleaning regimes and customer service and so on as well. So well worth doing. Credibility. There are things you can say you're doing, but there are some accreditation schemes out there, and I'll come back to that in a second, which it's really worth taking account of too. And start now or sooner. This is not something to wait till Easter. It's something that needs to be ongoing, because people are planning and booking and so on their holidays literally right now. Lots of people desperate to go away, but just holding back until they get those assurances. So it's certainly a time to be active. Last couple of slides, and I make no apologies for a little bit of promo here of the 25 B&B in Torquay, which in the Tourism Awards won Devon and Southwest and National Gold B&B of the Year. If you go to their website, they give this assurance that all bookings are fully flexible, And if you need to change, we're happy to move your booking free of charge. Great. And then you see these logos. The AA COVID Confidence Scheme, which is relatively easy for businesses to adopt, takes quite a lot of work. It's free and it gives a degree of assurance. Over on the far right, you've got the We're Good to Go Visit England scheme, which is amazingly easy to do. Many would say it's too easy because there are some businesses who've signed up for that and there's no verification for it as yet. So I believe it will be continuing, but we haven't seen assurance on that. And to my mind, by far and away, the best scheme, the Quality in Tourism Safe, Clean and Legal scheme, which does cost you a bit. It's run by Quality in Tourism, who are actually headline sponsors of the awards as well. But we've independently looked at this. This is the independently verified scheme that has longevity because it says your business is safe, clean and legal and COVID absolutely compliant. And I've seen the measures they go through. And believe me, if I see a business with that logo, I know it's a safe place to go. So all of those well worth considering, and interesting that the 25 B&B has adopted every single one of them. And if I was a tourism business, I would probably do exactly that. A little different slide, and I'm not just sharing a photo of one of my dogs here because this is what dogs can do when they get into fields of bluebells, as mine did not last year but the year before. I think we've all seen the media coverage of increased dog ownership during COVID. A lot more people out there with dogs. A lot of them will want to go on holiday too. And believe me, after Brexit, taking your dog overseas is enormously problematic. And I gave up even trying to plan doing that when I was having a look a few months ago. So there's big demand from dog owners. The Southwest is the #1 place for dog holidays. And there are an awful lot of tourism businesses that say they are dog friendly and dog welcoming. We run a dog friendly category in the Tourism Awards. And believe me, a lot say they're dog friendly, but they're not really. And one of the participants in this slide is Brett up from near Dunster. Absolute fabulous little business that has won the Dog Friendly Award a couple of times. And there is a real difference between the businesses that are genuinely dog friendly and those that just have the tick box. And again, if I were a tourism business, I would be doing everything I could at the present to genuinely make sure that you, your staff, your facilities, everything is as welcoming as possible to people with dogs, because it's a huge portion of the market. And I'm going to stop at that point. I'm just putting out the logos of the various tourism awards we run. Later today, we're going to be announcing the finalists for the Cornwall Awards from the last year. So a busy day. And I look forward to any questions and chatting with all of you.
Thanks, Robin. Really good. I'm back. I've managed to get my connection back. I don't know how Toby's doing, but yeah, apologies everybody about that. I'm having some technical difficulties as well. Robin, that was really useful. Thanks very much. There's an element and there's a degree of well-founded skepticism amongst the customer base as to when things will return, but encouraging signs really that the pent-up demand is very, very much still there. And this latest lockdown hasn't really changed that with regards to 2021. We have got a couple of questions just to ask. I was just beforehand wanted to know your thoughts on the G7 summit announcement this week, these last couple of days, which is going to be held in Tregenna Castle Hotel in Cornwall for the first time ever. Just wanted to hear your thoughts on it, really. What do you think will be the impact of that?
I think it's going to have a huge impact. I'd say I'd probably a slightly cautious welcome because there are inevitably going to be some queries, and there is I think a check that everyone will need to be doing to make sure that the Southwest is absolutely COVID safe and there are no enhanced risks from it. But in terms of putting the global spotlight on Cornwall, and Cornwall not just as a tourism destination with great beaches, but with a real long-term history and heritage of innovation, and particularly in sustainable energy, in innovation, cleanliness, you name it, hospitality. I think the opportunity is absolutely fantastic. Of course, it's going to be Carbis Bay and Tregenna Castle and the Maritime Museum, so it'll be Cornwall wide. know it's already a huge amount of planning. So as long as the planning is all absolutely on top, I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's good. The Cardiff Bay area, the West Cornwall area as a whole, it's going to be fantastic, I think, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in June. I've got a question here from Sarah. Robin, do you think that the kind of experiences people are looking to have, are looking for, have changed as a result of COVID, i.e. more appreciation of nature and open air experiences?
Yes, I do. And there is more in the Visit Britain tracking research, which I could have quoted, but limited time. Yes, people are wanting to be doing outdoorsy things. We want to go to outdoorsy places, do outdoorsy things. At present, the desire for going into museums and tight spaces is not there. Hopefully that will change once vaccinations really do roll out and so on. But what we have as a region in terms of open air activities, surfing, kayaking, you name it, is enormously strong.
Sure. Thank you for that. Do keep your questions coming for any of our panelists today, because we're here to answer your questions. I want to move over to Toby now, if we can. Toby, can you hear me? Can we hear you is the more important thing. And we can hear you, yes, we can.
You can hear me. Good.
So I'd now like to introduce Toby Pool of Stephen Scown Solicitors, who's going to do his presentation on his thoughts on the key leisure and tourism related topics that he deals with day to day with his firm as we move into 2021. Toby, over to you. I hope your tech holds out.
Thank you, Ollie. Thank you, Robin. Thank you, Mike. Morning, everybody. As Ollie mentioned, I'm Toby Pool. I'm the partner in the real estate team and sector head of the leisure and tourism team here at Stephen Scown. We act for many leisure, hospitality, travel based clients in the southwest and further afield, across sort of hotels, holiday parks and residential parks, campsites, pubs, restaurants, gyms, any hospitality business in the sector. I'm just going to give you a bit of a sort of tour through what's been coming across our desks in our various teams, myself in the real estate team, but also colleagues in employment, our dispute resolution team, and IT, and also immigration as well, linked to employment. So first of all, just kicking off with real estate and sort of corporate activity in the last 12 months. Obviously, it's been a completely upended year for everybody. Last 12 months, but despite all of that, there's been good levels of activity, particularly in the hotels and the holiday park sector. In spite of all of that, it's been a mix of retirement, us acting on a mix of retirement sales, expansion, particularly in the holiday park sector. I know Ollie touched on this in a previous webinar. There's still a huge appetite out there in the park sector from particularly sort of the private equity, bigger operators, but also smaller groups as well, looking to acquire parks. And we've been involved in a number of those in the last 12 months. Some new entrants as well. Pleasingly in the hotel, we acted on a hotel acquisition in Exeter last year, and not as many on the pub side naturally recently, but hopefully that will come back again at some point soon. I've acted on behalf of 2 gym sites, one for a gym operator, Southwest gym operator expanding, and interestingly we were able to negotiate some COVID rent suspension provisions in their lease, which has proved extremely helpful for them, particularly going into this current third lockdown period. And also we had on behalf of a landlord client letting an investment property to another gym operator, a national gym operator. We've been able to keep that deal alive by agreeing a rent-free period for the tenant going in there. So, we've been able to sort of keep some deals moving, despite, what's happening in the wider economy, and as a result of COVID. We dealt with a holiday park sale during the first lockdown, which was proceeding until lockdown hit, and then it was on pause. But luckily, we were able to save the deal, and by parties entering into an option agreement during the course of last year, and that's since the option since subsequently been exercised by the buyer, who was extremely keen on the site and to proceed with their development of it, and that's completed in the last few months. So there's been a lot of promising activity out there on the transaction side. Colleagues in Cornwall also a good news story on the pub side, actually, on a leasehold pub on behalf of a landlord client of ours, managed to secure a long lease to a London pub operator towards the end of last year, who had decided to move some of their staff down from Tier 4 London down to, at the time, Tier 1 Cornwall. So sort of lots of businesses really thinking sort of outside the box a bit, and obviously we've heard a lot about businesses having to pivot, the businesses, and very difficult, for pubs and restaurants as well, having to sort of suddenly turn to solely takeaway offerings, particularly when we've had restrictions imposed. So let's just hope that the vaccine rollout continues at a pace, and we have the sectors able to open up a lot more in the spring. So in light of all that, I mean, I think it's sort of I think a lot of the other panelists today have also said that I think we're very optimistic about the next few years. I think hopefully, who knows how much we can open up as a sector this year, but certainly there's a lot of pent up demand. We're all hearing everybody's had a pause on holidays for the last 12-18 months. Many people have not been able to get away, so I think there's going to be huge pent up demand when this is all released again. But it's also enabled, as we've heard a lot of as well, it's enabled a lot of operators to invest in their sites, which is a good thing, and look to further expansion. So I don't know if I could do my Chris Whitty thing. Next slide, please. Right, thank you. So next up, employment. Right, employment, there we go. So yeah, undoubtedly it's been an extremely tough 12 months for the hospitality industry from an employment perspective. It's undoubtedly the hardest hit sector in terms of redundancies in the wake of COVID. And approximately a third of all redundancies in the UK are in the sector. The furlough scheme, the coronavirus job retention scheme, has obviously been an absolute lifeline for the industry, as well as other sectors, but particularly hospitality. Many employees obviously have been furloughed for extended periods. So the team are really sort of discussing, with clients, really, the need to focus on, never more important to focus on rebuilding employee engagement with employees, those that have been on furlough, coming back from furlough, and undoubtedly there will be redundancies, and sadly there will be business failures going forward, unfortunately. But hopefully that's as little as possible. The team are starting to talk a lot to clients about the vaccine, what it means for our business clients, and we're seeing increasing questions about to what extent employers can require employees to have the jab, and what they should do if the employees refuse. It's obviously unrelated sector, but the care sector having issues, with care staff refusing the jab, and I think a lot of that is obviously we're hearing it's misinformation, promoted by WhatsApp or some social media outlets. But I heard this morning, I think that they're hoping that all in the care sector, certainly all care staff and residents, they're hoping to have their first jab by the end of in the next week or two. And also connected to that is testing, and how employers might go about implementing regular testing with their staff. COVID's obviously had a huge impact on the way we're all working. 12 months ago, we were never used to agile working as much as we are now. Video conferencing obviously has improved, has grown enormously. But whilst home working doesn't obviously translate, to the hospitality sector, for example, as it does for other sectors such as professional services, where people are able to work from home, obviously employees in general are wanting far greater flexibility than they had previously. So the team are advising all sorts of clients on aspects related to that. So many of the measures taken around the last 12 months around COVID obviously will impact on businesses in the sector and their impact on their staffing needs, whether it's by way of decreased capacity and visitor numbers, obviously at various times, which has happened, more electronic digitalized services, and also changes to your visitor offering. So the team are there to, and are regularly looking at businesses' staffing structure and whether it's fit for purpose, and taking quick queries on that, and whether it whether it meets the changed needs of the business going forward with what's happening. So the employment team sit within our, the immigration team sit within our employment team. We all heard for nothing more for 4 years from Brexit, obviously, until COVID came along, and thankfully the deal was finally struck in between Christmas and New Year, as we know, and the Brexit transition period ended on the 31st of December, and so with that came an end to the free movement of workers from the EU. The upshot of which is that EU, EEA, and Swiss nationals coming from the EU from the 1st of January are not allowed to live and work in the UK without applying for a visa beforehand. The points-based system was introduced. Obviously, that covers more sort of skilled worker visas, so more sort of professional service and science sector relating to that, I would think. But a point which the immigration team are advising our hospitality clients on is in relation to sponsor licenses. Obviously, large proportion of EU nationals work in the hospitality sector in the southwest, have done for many years, and any hospitality business looking to recruit from outside the UK appreciate that recruitment, at the moment is not something that is sort of foremost in businesses lists, but anybody looking to recruit from outside the UK from the 1st of January will have had to have applied for a sponsor license from the Home Office to do that, and also EU nationals who were living in the UK prior to the end of the transition period will still be able to apply for status under the EU settlement scheme, which will enable them to continue living and working in the UK. And the deadline for applications to that settlement scheme is just less than 6 months' time, at the end of June this year. So the immigration team are still busy advising clients in relation to settled status applications. There's currently no changes to right to work checks, which is an important process that employers need to carry out of all EU nationals they employ until the 30th of June this year. But at the end of June, employers are going to be required to carry out extra checks to ensure that their EU national employees have the right to work in the UK. So, i.e. that they have a visa or settled status under the EU settlement scheme. So anticipate there's going to be quite a bit of extra work on that side of things for the next few months. So moving on to sort of disputes, the sort of things that the team are dealing with there, sort of categorised into sort of three main areas really. First of all is commercial disputes. Robin mentioned it earlier on his presentation, the question of repayment of deposits, obviously, and holiday letting cancellations. In the CMA guidelines, the CMA is the Competition and Markets Authority, formerly the OFT. It's rather consumer friendly, but the disputes team and the firm have actually developed a fixed fee package for advice to businesses, in respect of any queries on deposit returns and cancellations. But as Robin mentioned, I think that the key message is obviously to communicate well what your policies are on the website, and then hopefully there wouldn't be too many issues should crop up for businesses there. The landmark case on Friday we all heard about, the Supreme Court decision decided the FCA and Arch case decision on business interruption claims. So that's come as obviously a huge boost to business owners in the sector who have just not been able to open due to the pandemic through no fault of their own. So I think that those claims will inevitably now be on the increase this year as the insurance industry digests that decision. In addition, I think there probably also will be interest claims for late payment of insurance payouts. So the team can help with that if businesses have any issues surrounding business interruption. The next section is sort of succession disputes. The team have noticed a sort of steady increase in number of businesses going through an ownership change. I think obviously the various lockdown periods we've been through and restrictions have been an opportunity for a lot of businesses to take stock and assess things going forward, and whether it's due to people having more time for reflection, wanting to sort of move the business, wanting to move on themselves, individuals within the business, or business restructuring due to financial pressures. There seems certainly to be an appetite for that currently, and that will no doubt continue. The team have actually set up a cross dispute resolution corporate offering, capitally named BODES, which stands for Business Ownership Disputes and Exit Strategies, which again is proving popular with some fixed pricing as well. The dispute side, on the property side, on land disputes, the property litigation team have been involved with the leading case, and judgment still awaited on the case on behalf of the country's largest owner of nightclubs, and on behalf of others. It's a bit of a test case on seeking a ruling on whether their leases are frustrated or whether they're released from paying rent due to illegality from opening. Obviously, that side of the sector has been particularly badly hit because just literally have not been able to open since March last year. I think the team are eagerly awaiting judgment on that case. And then finally on disputes, multiple matters dealing with the usual sorts of instructions, such as rent negotiations, and tenant Section 25 notices on leasehold properties. And obviously, a moratorium currently on forfeiting leases, applies to all commercial leases. So some landlords are also instructing the team at looking at pursuing money judgments. But I mean, in relation to the hospitality sector, Mike mentioned earlier that I know for a fact that a lot of pub companies have been extremely understanding and very generous in terms of agreeing rent-free periods during this period. And you know, some pub companies, you know, taking the opportunity to you know, improve their estate during this period, so that hopefully, you know, they can reap the benefits coming out of this. Last but not least, IP and IT. I'll whiz through this, and there are a few aspects here which are keeping the team busy. You'd all thought you'd heard the back of GDPR, dreaded GDPR, but coming out of Brexit and coming out of the EU at the end of December, data continues to be a big issue going forwards. We've got until June apparently to negotiate what's known as an adequacy decision in terms of data with the European Commission. It's something that should have been sorted out prior to Brexit, but obviously wasn't done. And you know, the current guidance is prepare for the worst, hope for the best. So watch this space there. I'm told that businesses there'll be a need for businesses to identify where any personal data is being processed in the EU. So things such as online travel agencies, booking systems, Microsoft or Google services commonly all have EU bases, and see whether they can be moved to the UK. If they can't, then businesses will need to revise their agreements with those parties, those OTAs and booking systems, or prepare to use an alternative. It's essentially the pain and effort of GDPR compliance all over again. But obviously, if you're a business that has done a data map for GDPR purposes, then it becomes a much easier task. So that's going to be a big source of work, I think, for the next 6 to 12 months. Changes on the IP front. I won't go into that in any detail, but you know, there's a need to check if there are any problematic marks on the trademark register, and the team carry out searches at a very reasonable cost of £180 plus VAT to check those with changes in intellectual property and trademarks. Then lastly, consumer rights. The divergence of laws between the UK and the EU is not immediate, and for the key consumer legislative requirements, you know, look likely to remain similar this year. But there are a few quirks and anomalies to watch out for. Firstly, if you're a business that processes personal data of EU nationals, and I understand that's employees or potentially guests, and you need to go through the data mapping exercise to check this. Businesses may need an authorised representative in that EU territory, so wherever that may be. So that's something that is still a little bit uncertain. The social media as well. If you're engaging with the use of influencers, brace yourself. There are code compliance requirements coming up in respect to the non-broadcast advertising code, and one of the stipulations is that businesses must have a proper influencer appointment agreement in place. So sorry, that's a bit of a whistle-stop tour through various aspects that our team are helping with, but I hope you found that useful. Are we going to?
Yeah, really good. Thank you for that. As always, really informative, and I hope that's helped a lot of the. You know, I'm looking through our attendance list here. We've got a lot of operators on the line, which is, you know, really useful, and I hope it has been useful for you. Some really key issues there. You know, my take from that, my take, we have actually not pretty much. We have run out of time. It's dragged on a little bit due to our technical difficulties earlier on in the webinar. Apologies, I lost my line at one point, so I wasn't able to finish off my market talk. You know, we've got a lot of. I know that we've got a couple of caravan park and holiday park self-catering unit owners on our attendance list today. I know that from what Toby was saying, with the exiting of the EU, there have been issues around, for example, caravan supply, holiday home supply, getting orders now for 2022, for example. That's the sort of lead times that you're talking about just to get holiday homes ordered to try to satisfy the pent-up demand that is coming and that people know are coming. But really, my takeaways from today's talk have been that there is the market is still there. It is somewhat split, but it is definitely still active. There is cautious optimism towards the spring and onwards for 2021, definitely. But certainly the points that Robin raised in his talk, as well as Toby's, towards it is key to get that marketing message of safety across. And that is a very, very key point. And I hope that's a takeaway point for everybody today. I'd like to thank everyone for first of all coming along. We're going to leave it there. Many thanks to all of you for attending. Special thanks to our contributors, to Mike, to Toby, to Robin, for Leslie in the background as well, for doing the background work, which is all important. The recording, as I said before, is going to be on our YouTube channel after this. I wasn't quite able to finish the market element of our talk with Mike. If anybody's got any questions at all that they want to fire either to myself, to Mike, or inadvertently then to Robin and Toby, please do get in contact with using the emails below. If you've got any further questions, that'd be great. That'd be fantastic. We'd be happy to help you. Many thanks again for coming. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, and here's to a successful and safe remainder of 2021. Thanks for coming.